We're recording.
What's going on, you SOLIDWORKS nerds? Welcome to the podcast. We are on Feature Fridays. My name is Brandon Adkins, and of course, I've got with me my co-host, my pal Garrett Klein. What's up, Garrett?
Hey, fellow nerds, and Brandon.
Yes, sir. So we want to welcome you guys. We thought it would be fun and informative to kick off a little podcast to help you guys learn everything there is to know about SOLIDWORKS. So that could be a pretty long discussion, I feel like. So we're going to do hopefully a once a month podcast, whatever we, I guess, feel like you guys need. We'll base it on some feedback, but we'd love to kick things off with some things that we wished we knew about SOLIDWORKS when we got started. So that's kind of where we're going to begin things for now. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll get into our kind of second segment, I guess, talking about common support questions. So we'll take a look through some of the support history and kind of see where some of those common questions come up and hopefully answer a few things for you guys. And we'll tell you what we're going to talk about next on the next episode of the podcast. So, Garrett, what do we got for today?
So, like you said, today we're going to look at 5 things that we wish that we knew when we started. Brandon, I mean, you've had quite a bit of experience with SOLIDWORKS. I've been using SOLIDWORKS for, I think, 18-something years now. I don't know. Longer than I've been doing anything else probably at this point. So
you're an old timer compared to me. I think I've only got like 12 years. So,
oh man, yeah. So I mean, I've definitely learned a lot of things over the past 18 years, and man, there's so many things that I wasted time on, or I wish that I had known. So I think we'll just get started with that. Let's just start talking about what's the first thing that you think everybody would like to know that you wish that you had known, Brandon?
When I think back to starting with SOLIDWORKS, I was learning it in college, and I was just kind of blindly going through the lessons in the book, right? That's basically how I learned SOLIDWORKS, is they handed us a huge book and said, here you go through it, which was fine. But at the same time, there was a lot of things that I didn't understand how they worked. So like when I was creating my first assemblies, for example, I had no clue how file references worked. In fact, it was like probably a year and a half, 2 years into using SOLIDWORKS that I actually kind of figured out how that stuff works. Like your assembly is going to contain these files that are located somewhere else. Like, I'll be honest, I broke a lot of things in my first little bit using SOLIDWORKS because I wanted to rename files or move stuff around and just didn't really understand why it didn't work,
Yeah, I definitely know, like, my first couple jobs out of college, man, like, I didn't know anything about version control or file referencing, and I redid the same thing over and over again quite a few times, man. So much times. So
yeah, and we both spent a long time in support too. And how many calls do you think we got about file references in a week?
It's like every day.
Yeah, I don't even think I could put a number on it. That was just one of those things. Like I was in the same boat as pretty much everyone else. Like it was kind of a mystery at first, but once you figure it out, there's some rules that you need to follow, and it's not that bad.
Yeah, I think at some point we should talk about those rules, like file reference order. I think that's one of those things that there's a lot of good information out there that it's really important to know if you use SOLIDWORKS.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Stuff you can find in the help for sure, but it's good to talk about it, and kind of really understand how that works.
Yeah. I think probably for me, one of the first things, like thinking back, that I really wish that I had known, I'll go ahead and show you actually. Can you see SOLIDWORKS?
Yep, I got you.
So one of the first things that I really had wished that I had known, and I'm going to be honest that, let me go and turn these on. Filters. Filters are one of those things, man, that just got me. And it's something that I don't use all that often, right? So if you get a filter turned on, there's my face filter, the surface filter, I get a point, something like that. I would have this filter icon and I couldn't click on anything, right? I'd be selecting it and man, just ridiculous. Like just so frustrating. And
Oh
what I ended
yeah.
up doing was just honestly, I would close SolidWorks and open it back up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, me
I
too.
had known that all I had to do was press the F6 button and that thing would go away. Like that would have been awesome. But that's one of those things, man. I just wish that I had known. Would
Yeah,
have
I'm
saved me
right there with me. I'm
so
right there
much
with you.
headache.
It took me a bit to figure that out too. I remember seeing that little funnel icon and I didn't know what it meant. And I'm just kind of fumbling around like you're pounding on the keyboard. You're trying to get some stuff done and learn SolidWorks. And all of a sudden you can't create a sketch on a face that you selected. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I did the same thing. Close the program down, see if I could figure it out that way.
Yeah. I think probably the third thing after file referencing, filters, for me, I did a lot of frame design, things with like standard structural shapes. And I used the toolbox for that. And I'm sure we'll talk about the toolbox at some point, but like just, oh man, my assemblies were just garbage because of the way that I used it. And I just didn't know how to do it any better. And that's really what like Weldments are for. And just multi-body part design in general. I think knowing that, how I could design things, even in the context of the same part, relate them together and easily make changes without having to just like kind of start from scratch or break a bunch of mates and have to go fix stuff. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So the toolbox has some of those structural members in it, right?
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the most common misconception that I hear from people is toolbox is required for frame design and that kind of stuff, which is definitely not the case. Weldments is there for everyone to use, but people that are new to SolidWorks, they think, oh, okay, standard stuff like tubes and I-beams, that should come from the toolbox, right?
It's in there. Like it is in there, some of it, but you know, the profiles and stuff that come with the Weldments feature are a lot more comprehensive for sure,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the benefits of the configuration specific Weldment profiles that were added a few years ago. Like,
Yes,
oh,
absolutely
that's a
love
game
it.
changer. So,
I
yeah.
remember my Weldment profile libraries and just how many files were in there before they actually added that. That was a pretty big deal. I'm a fan. What were some of the failures you would say in taking the other approach before you discovered Weldments? What made it
So,
hard for you in an assembly?
so I think probably a couple of things. Like my understanding of configurations was not real great, right? And if you're
Yeah.
going to have that same piece of angle iron multiple places, like you're going to need to configure it because it's going to be the same parts, just different lengths of that. That's not doable. Absolutely. Is it an efficient way to design? Absolutely not. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go from one user to another, not having a really great knowledge of the software and using the toolbox, you're dealing with different parts that don't have those configurations that you created. So when it goes from one user to another, they're referencing a different toolbox, it'll just implode on itself.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a whole separate topic, right? Why people love to hate the toolbox. Like you said, we'll get into that, but there's plenty of reasons why, stuff like that doesn't work. And once you understand it, it makes sense. The thing for me though, I used the same approach too before I knew about Weldments. Just managing all that stuff that you're assembling together as individual parts, like making all of your miter cuts and assembling all the rectangular tubing together, maybe creating things like in context parts and features. It just becomes a mess pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Getting a total length of a particular size of tube or something like that, like it's easy with Weldments. But
yeah, it's built in.
Yeah,
it's part of what you get.
I'm going to convince everybody to use it at some point. But
if you're doing any kind of structure design, you should be using Weldments.
Yeah. Cool. What about you, Brandon? What's your next thing?
Something that came to mind when we were talking about this is like features that may have a certain classification, or you think it's classified as something very specific. Like a great example is the mold tools tab, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff on that mold tools tab that people look at that and they say, well, I don't do mold design. None of those tools are going to help me. So they just shut that toolbar off and they never come back to it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've got things like analysis tools that are going to help you to figure out, even if you're not making molded parts, you still want to, be able to check certain feature geometries, and maybe you're going to take advantage of a few of those tools that you can really use for anything.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite examples of that is like the surface cut feature, right? Mm-hmm. It's over on the surfaces tool, so maybe like people don't explore that. They don't know about like those tools, but you just use a plane, cut off everything that's on that side of the plane, right?
Yeah.
It's just
exactly
so easy. Yeah, and then like the mold tools are definitely a great example because you could use something like the cavity feature or scaling and all that fun stuff that is useful in a lot of different applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe we can take a closer look at some of this stuff too. Like you see a few things here that are listed on mold tools, but they're really not even mold tools at all. Like some of these surfacing features. If you guys are doing any kind of surface body modeling, these are all tools that are contained in the surfaces toolbar, but they're also kind of replicated on mold tools because they help with that, right? This is really just a way to kind of regroup some of those tools. If you do that type of design, makes it that much easier to find what you need. But I'll be honest, I use tools like knit surface all the time. Like if I've got an imported part that maybe has some bad geometry, I'll go in and rip it apart, stitch it back up, knit those surfaces back together. Plenty of use cases for all this stuff, but
yeah, and my favorite
they're not just for molds.
My favorite feature is probably just to the right of that move face feature.
Oh yeah,
use that all the time.
I love some move face.
Yeah.
I use that one a lot for 3D printing.
Yeah.
If you need to add a little bit of clearance, that's a sweet feature for that.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. I think I threw the parts away, but I printed some parts and I didn't have the right wall thickness. And I could have adjusted in my slicer, but oh man, my prints looked like garbage. And I just used move face to just like bring that in just a little bit because I didn't really want to change my slicer settings. And print turned out like just amazing after that. Like
that's awesome.
Surface. So
such an easy feature too.
Yeah. People might hate you a little bit when they look at your feature tree after you've done a few of them.
Yeah, for sure. I've hated myself in a couple situations like that.
Yeah. Like, where did this come from? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm just another move face anyway, so it's all good.
Yep.
Let's move it back.
Yep. Move copy bodies is another one that kind of fits in that category too, which we won't get too far into it, but I've added way too many move copies in part designs before.
Yeah. Nice.
So what's that put us at? We're at
I think we're
4 things we wish we knew.
Yeah, so probably the fifth one. I'd say probably the RX tool. Honestly, like there's so much good stuff in the RX tool. Mm-hmm. You seen SOLIDWORKS?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So RX tool, I'm going to close SOLIDWORKS here. You can find from their start menu. If I pop it open, like I said, there's so much good stuff in here, right? If you're troubleshooting graphics card issues and stuff, you use OpenGL mode. If you think it might be a settings issue, like the graphics card thing didn't resolve it, you use tools, option settings to bypass all your setting stuff. The benchmark tool, right, where you can run the benchmark and see like how your hardware compares to other people's hardware. I think one of my favorite like recent enhancements to it is probably the reliability check, where you can see like, what's been happening. Has this thing been crashing? Has it just been closing like normal? Like what's been going on? I've been writing some programs and stuff for SolidWorks, so I have a little bit more unusual activity than I normally would. But yeah, that's more to talk about my programming skill probably than than anything. Then you also have like system maintenance. I don't think anybody even ever uses, but it's there to kind of clear out all these temporary directories that SolidWorks stores things in that get full and kind of slow things down. Right? You have your diagnostics tab, which you come in to make sure that things are like set up properly, at least to some extent, like checking your graphics card driver and checking to make sure that there's nothing that's obviously broken on your system.
Yeah. This page in particular is huge for me, right? Because both of us are supporting different versions of SolidWorks at any given time. I have to do installs pretty frequently, so I'm constantly checking this kind of stuff. Like, is my graphics driver up to date? This is a great place to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have a link right there to go get your latest graphics card driver. So definitely awesome. And then probably the problem capture, I think, is probably the one that most people think of, where you can come in, like if you did have an issue, record it, and then zip it up and send it to somebody. From a support standpoint, probably the thing that I didn't know was that the RX tool can open up like existing pack and goes. So if I were to go somewhere where I created one, I can open that up and I can see like different information about that system and all their system logs or whatever it is that was included inside of that pack and go. So
yep,
there's a ton of really good stuff in there.
I was probably like 3 years into doing support before I was told that you could actually do that. So I was just like digging through text files and stuff, trying to find what I could to help people with crashing issues or whatever.
Yeah.
Just, it's nice to be able to put it all in one place.
Yeah.
SolidWorks RX.
For you guys who don't know, Brandon and I started working for a reseller on the same day, like 10 years ago, basically, like 11 years ago now. And yep, Brandon was, you were still going back and forth to school, I think, at that point, right? So I was there like all day. Then you'd come in for like majority of the day, I would say.
Yeah, we started at the beginning of summer. I was going into my senior year of college, so I was intern boy when Garrett got hired full time. I was taking all the low level support calls and stuff.
Yeah, and we were for a small reseller, and man, once I got hired, like everybody just decided, I think, to travel all at once. So I was all by myself, didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Oh, it's bad. But
those were the good old days.
Learned a lot really fast because you had to.
Yep. Be light on your feet. Just Garrett and intern boy for the day.
Oh man,
yeah, that's awesome. Well, we covered some good stuff today, I think, right?
Yeah. So our 5 things were what? File referencing, filters, Weldments / multi-body part modeling, right? Feature use, what like doesn't matter where it is, you can still use it. And then the RX tool. I think those were the 5 things that we were like, we wish that we had known. Would have saved us a ton of time. So
completely agree. Lots of good stuff there that could have saved me some headaches.
Yeah. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about was a support question, right? Did you have that support question, Brandon?
Yeah. So something that we hear pretty frequently, specific to sheet metal. Why won't my part flatten on the drawing? I got my flat pattern. Everything looked okay. What's going on with my drawing? Why can't I see the flat pattern?
Gotcha.
So we see this kind of thing come up pretty frequently. And there's a pretty straightforward answer for it, right, Garrett?
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that. I need some Go Juice here really quick first, though. The green is
Get
for
the super
Go.
caffeine. Yes. I'm all out of Go Juice now.
Oh, no. So I'll go ahead and fire SolidWorks up real quick. Let's make a sheet metal part. Guys, just remember that I'm the PDM guy. So, when you're seeing me doing some SolidWorks stuff, it's it might be questionable. So let's go ahead and just make like a box or something really quick. So let's just fully define the sketch. And we'll just extrude it over in the metric system. Sure. And you know, I could use all of my fancy sheet metal tools, but I'm just gonna use convert to sheet metal because it's fast, and I'm not really here to show you sheet metal per se as like fix a sheet metal problem. So
you took a Boss extrude and made sheet metal?
Mind blown. Yeah.
Got some funny looking corners there.
Yeah. Let's just.
You actually used another one of my favorite features there too. Fully defined sketch.
Yeah, I think that's another one that like a lot of people don't know about. So we have our sheet metal part, right? We can flatten it. Looks good, right? Let's just go ahead and save it. Just gonna call it part 1 because I'm not very. I can't think right now while I'm trying to click and talk and do other things. So I like B-size drawings. And we can see that, so we should be able to just like pull out like our flat pattern right here. Boom, right away. Got our flat pattern. And from our view palette, we could also just throw in like an ISO or something, maybe.
Yeah, so that's part of the drawing automation that's built into this, right? You got your part where you are able to access the flat pattern, but it's going to throw it right on your view palette there, so you can just drag and drop on the sheet real easy.
Yeah, and this is, I think, where people go wrong right away when they create the drawing. As soon as I drop that view on there, that's where I think things go wrong for people. So,
yep, I agree.
In my model, all that I had was a default configuration, right? As soon as I drop it on a drawing, it creates a derived configuration underneath the default configuration, this flat pattern. So how you get in this scenario where you can't flatten the part? Basically, people will open this up and they'll go in and start making changes to it. But what they'll do is they'll be, and not even realize that they are, in that derived configuration that'll be active. They'll come in and essentially configure that feature by suppressing it, right? And then they might just come in and like add a flange or something off of that, right? And they'll go back to their model, or their drawing, excuse me, and they're like, well, this is the flat pattern. I don't see why that's not working. It's because the configurations are wrong now, right? So you got to open this thing up, go down to that flat pattern and unsuppress it, right? And what I usually recommend for people to do is just to look at your configurations before you go back. And then if it makes it easier for you, honestly, what I do is use this flatten button and unclick flatten and kind of go back to your drawing, and everything should be fine.
Yeah. I think the way that you showed it there really resonates pretty well with a lot of people. Is if I go back into that part file, the first thing that should be a red flag that they see is, why is this thing flat right now? It wasn't flat when I went into the drawing, right? So they just, first thought that pops in their head, okay, I'll just go ahead and suppress that flat pattern.
Yeah.
Right. They're kind of overlooking what they actually did there and modified that derived configuration.
Yeah, because I think, at least when I teach like the essentials class, it's been a little while since I've done that, but the first thing that I show people when I'm showing them how to create configurations and modify configurations is how you manually configure things. So I create a new configuration, then I go and suppress the features that I don't want. And then I can toggle back and forth between the two. And that's essentially what you're doing, right?
Yep. Exactly right. Well, I think that was a good walkthrough, man. Pretty common question that comes up, and hopefully that sheds some light on it for people about why their drawing might be messed up on a sheet metal part.
Nice. Cool. Well, I think that's the answer to that question. And so, Brandon, what do we have planned for next time? What's the?
Well, I kind of alluded to it a little bit already. We're going to get into that the one that everybody loves to hate, and that's the SOLIDWORKS toolbox. So
there's a lot of advantages to it if you know how to
there
use it.
definitely are. Yeah, that's right. You got to understand kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Probably the biggest thing that we see that's a challenge with Toolbox is people working in a multi-user environment. You may not have it set up correctly for it to actually work that way. So we're going to talk about the ins and outs of that on the next episode, and hopefully shed some light for you guys on how you can make your Toolbox experience a little bit better.
Awesome. Thanks for sticking with us, guys.
Yeah, fun times. We will see you on the next episode, SolidWorks nerds.